The richest countries are all focused on booster shots for the vaccine in the face of significant criticism. Meanwhile, Joe Biden announces that America will focus on its interests first and foremost, and then it immediately descends into another bitterly fought battle over abortion. My name is Mallen Baker. This is the Mallen Baker Show. To boost or not to boost? This week, the EU announced that it had reached its goal of vaccinating 70% of its adult citizens by the summer's end. Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that it was a great achievement, which really shows what we can do when we work together. It's a little odd because the official statistics from the European CDC says that it's just 68.7%. And statisticians think that even that figure is likely to be an overestimate. The head of data for the site Our World in Data, Edouard Mathieu, said this: "Looking at the number of adults in the EU according to the latest UN population estimates and the number of fully vaccinated people in different age groups in the available datasets, it does not seem plausible that 70% of adults are fully vaccinated yet." Why would they overstate it? Well, possibly because they set the target that 70% of adults will be vaccinated by the end of summer, and we just hit the end of summer. And they wonder why people are suspicious of official information sources on the pandemic. However, regardless of any von der Leyen by politicians, there's no doubt that the EU has vaccinated nearly 70% of its people. In so doing, it's now acquired far more doses than it needs to vaccinate every single person if it could but persuade them to take the shot. But it seems that's not the end of it. Early reports that the efficacy of a vaccine wanes over a relatively short time period, at least with the Delta variant, has posed the question to a number of governments whether or not they should embark on a campaign of booster shots for their citizens. It's something of an open question. According to the European CDC, there is no urgent need for COVID vaccine booster shots based on current evidence. Likewise, a recent population study by Public Health England showed that receiving 2 doses of either the Pfizer or the AstraZeneca vaccine provides high levels of protection against the Delta variant, suggesting that boosters aren't needed at the moment. There's also at least one preprint paper, so not peer-reviewed yet, contrary to some earlier reports suggesting that natural infection with Delta may produce stronger subsequent protection than achieved purely via the vaccines, which would suggest that those that have already had Delta are protected for the time being. Although that said, there is an argument for a third vaccine shot for medically vulnerable people. For instance, those who are undergoing treatment for blood cancer, where the efficacy of the double vaccination is significantly less, even as they are highly susceptible to the impact of the COVID-19 disease. The UK, Germany, France and Hungary have already agreed to offer additional shots to people who are in that situation. Although it's argued they don't really count as boosters, they count as part of the primary treatment course. The UK's Joint Committee on Vaccination and Immunisation made that argument. These people may not mount a full response to vaccination and therefore may be less protected than the wider population. This offer is separate to any potential booster programme. It said it was still awaiting further evidence on the question of boosters, and the definition sort of matters. Because as you can imagine, in a world where only a fraction of people have had access to the vaccines at all, the rich nations looking at booster shots for their own populations is seen as somewhat controversial. The World Health Organization has been particularly unimpressed at the early booster talk and has called on countries to postpone such measures until at least the end of September to permit the rest of the world to catch up. The WHO's Dr. Mike Ryan said this: "Regardless of what ultimately the science comes to an agreement on regarding the length of protection or the marginal increase in benefits from having booster doses, the reality is right now, today, if we think about this in terms of an analogy, we're planning to hand out extra life jackets to people who already have life jackets while we're leaving other people to drown without a single life jacket. That's the reality." The WHO criticised the EU for insufficient vaccine shipments to countries in Africa and Latin America. That's not stopping the British media, many of whom today had headlines demanding that the government get on with pushing through a programme of booster shots for the over 50s. And meanwhile, the Biden administration in the US is ignoring all of the finessing and has simply announced that it's looking to roll out booster shots to be given 8 months after the previous shots. Indeed, so clear has it been that it has caused turmoil within the system as the administration has jumped over its own regulators in its hurry to frame its plans. 2 of the top Food and Drug Administration officials have resigned in protest at the lack of autonomy being given to the FDA in planning relating to booster vaccines. The FDA is said to have a potential mutiny amongst its staff who view the plan to offer boosters to all adults as premature and unnecessary. Officials, nevertheless, are scrambling to meet Biden's deadline of September the 20th for data to show the boosters' benefits, an experience that is being likened to that under Trump, when they were pushed into accelerating their initial authorization for the vaccines. Politico said that it had spoken to 11 current and former health officials who testified to growing exasperation with the administration's disjointed process for implementing its booster plan. Members of the CDC's independent vaccine advisory panel likewise expressed frustration, arguing that the administration's rushing ahead with boosters before the regulators had even advised on them could exacerbate vaccine hesitancy. In principle, Biden has said that of course its strategy is contingent on the FDA deeming the boosters safe and needed and the CDC recommending them. But the apparently solid plans have been very much at odds with that, and have resulted in a huge amount of confusion on the ground. So Helen Keep Talbot, Associate Professor of Medicine at Vanderbilt University, said that many hospitals across the South have already begun administering third doses in their healthcare workers in areas where there's been a surge in Delta cases. I think since it was given with a date, many assumed that it was given a blessing by the White House and this was the next step. Indeed, Biden's only expressed public doubt has been whether or not boosters might be given just 5 months after the primary doses rather than waiting for 8 months. The point is, of course, in the typically litigious United States, if providers have been immunising people outside of the current FDA and CDC recommendations, then they are put highly at risk should any of the recipients develop side effects or worse. The CDC believes that nearly 1 million Americans have recently received additional doses. Only ones that were given to a small number of immunocompromised patients would have been authorised use. Now, all of this ends up as grist for the politicised mill on vaccines in America. So it's not surprising that when it was announced that top podcaster Joe Rogan had said that he had caught COVID-19, he then went on to describe the cocktail of drugs and vitamins that he'd thrown at it. No mention of whether he'd been vaccinated, but instead the report that was quickly amplified by the mainstream media that amongst his self-medication cocktail was ivermectin. The media has also been reporting numerous deaths from COVID of people that have been taking ivermectin in advance of infection, particularly dwelling on any conservative radio hosts that might have publicly expressed scepticism about the vaccine. But of course, it's the chaotic public policy apparently disconnected from the safety and efficacy judgments that's kind of fed all of that scepticism in the first place and helped it to become yet another feature of the political divide. Not that there haven't been 2 even more explosive such features this week, which we'll get to in just a minute. But first, we've talked a lot about how we know what works and what doesn't in this age where we've all been focused on this pandemic. Arguments about whether the vaccines are effective or whether they're safe. Arguments about alternatives like ivermectin, whether they're effective, and how come some will look at the same trials and come to different conclusions. And through all of this, there are certain standards that we look to, specifically this thing that is now increasingly referred to as evidence-based medicine. How do we know what's true and what isn't in medicine? Why are some trials flawed, and how do unscrupulous corporations twist the system to favour their drugs at the expense of the truth? In short, what do you need to know about evidence-based medicine? That's what I'll be discussing in next week's deep dive video, going live on this channel at 7 PM UK time on Monday next week. Join me for that. The US completed its evacuation effort from Afghanistan this week. President Biden went onto television and declared it a huge success. So it's kind of weird that there seem to be so many people blaming other people, which isn't normally what happens when something has been a fantastic success. And it's weird that Biden was saying that no Americans would be left behind, and it's now a success, although Americans were left behind. I don't imagine the administration much enjoyed seeing that US vehicles and equipment left behind in Afghanistan has now promptly been shipped to Tehran, which you might think is better positioned to make use of it against American interests in the Middle East. But no, Biden said that his decision was, quote, the right decision, a wise decision, and the best decision for America. There's nothing like writing your own reviews. I'm fairly sure that whether your decisions get labelled as wise is largely down to others and probably posterity, not down to you. Now, when it comes to the simple principle of getting out of Afghanistan, it seems that the American people are broadly signed up to that. They think Biden made a hash out of doing it, but they do still agree with the principle. It's not entirely clear how much of the meaning of it they fully get, but America is now becoming an inward-looking nation. Biden's speech established a wider foreign policy position that was a significant break from the past, albeit one that's been bubbling up arguably since Obama. He said this decision about Afghanistan is not just about Afghanistan. It's about ending an era of major military operations to remake other countries. Remaking other countries is a framing that's designed to make the decision seem like the natural, common sense one to make. What it really is code for playing the role of a superpower in world affairs, projecting power to the world, being a force for the values underlying democracy and freedom broadly defined. But America now will reach out to pursue those who attack it, but otherwise it's retreating back into itself, focusing on the threats posed by China and Russia. But that's weird because containing the would-be alternative superpowers was always a big part of why America did project its power overseas. Biden even said this, and there's nothing China or Russia would want more in this competition than the United States to be bogged down another decade in Afghanistan. And yet both China and Russia have been extremely quick off the mark engaging the Taliban as American forces exited the stage. Indeed, the Taliban has already announced a major deal with China for funds to help the country make its economic comeback. In so doing, they're looking to consolidate their influence. They have no interest in remaking Afghanistan in the sort of way that Joe Biden talks about. And that's because both are now looking to the future with the enhanced expectation that it is their time, or at least China's time, with Russia perhaps in alliance, to take the mantle of the dominant superpower in the world. It's hard to think of a time in history when a great power stepped back and left a vacuum that didn't immediately have someone else looking to fill that space. China has been systematically building its international network of influence through its Belt and Road Initiative. It's been aggressively seeking to impose its foreign policy preferences by threatening all of those that have entered into some commercial dependency on them to fall into line or suffer the consequences. And regardless of the fact that Joe Biden thinks Afghanistan has been a rip-roaring success, China and Russia have watched and only seen American weakness. Biden's speech sought to make an asset with a home audience that is tired of engagement with the world, a policy of managed retreat. What fills the vacuum? How allies react? How China takes its next steps in asserting its dominance? Those are all open questions. Now, while China makes its plans, America has something else to fight about. I talked before about how America polarised over a number of touchstone issues. They served the party campaign strategists at the time because they were framed as moral absolutes, issues that couldn't be conclusively solved and were always on the brink of being lost to the other side, so would motivate your people to get out. One of those issues, abortion, moved back centre stage this week, guaranteeing yet more deepening rage on both sides as Texas introduced its so-called heartbeat law. The law bans abortions from the point where a baby's heartbeat becomes discernible, hence the name, around 6 weeks. Since that's well before most women will even have detected that they're pregnant, it is de facto a ban on abortion. The other extraordinary feature of the bill is that it delegates the power of enforcement to individual citizens, who are encouraged to sue abortion providers and others that don't meet the new law, being granted a $10,000 reward for a successful prosecution, which is the weirdest law I've heard for a long time. But it was likely framed that way to avoid the strict interpretation of a precedent, June Medical Serves v. Russo, which ruled this: the state may not impose an undue burden on the woman's ability to obtain an abortion of a non-viable fetus. So the Texas law sidesteps that because it's not the state taking action, but individual citizens. Now, you wouldn't expect that sort of sleight of hand to survive non-partisan scrutiny, but of course the judiciary in the US has become politicised, so who knows? And that's what's really raising the temperature, of course. Such a law is seen as a direct challenge to the precedent case Roe v. Wade. The Supreme Court has just refused a request to block the implementation of the Texas law in advance of legal challenge. Given the stronger than usual conservative majority on the court, it's highlighting the vulnerability people are now feeling as to what will happen once the make or break case finally makes it there. The court's majority opinion stressed that it was not ruling on the constitutionality of the Texas law and did not disallow procedurally proper challenges to it, but that the request to block it had not made its case in the face of complex and novel procedural questions. The question being put to the court wasn't the law's constitutionality, but whether it could be challenged in federal court rather than state level. The law's defenders argued that because of the nature of the law, how it's enforced through individuals bringing lawsuits against providers, that meant that only Texas courts could rule on the matter. And the fact that there is no case currently being brought under the law, there is no party that has standing with the court for it to rule upon. Now, the minority judges weren't having it, and they expressed strongly dissenting opinions. For instance, Justice Sonia Sotomayor said this: "The court's order is stunning. Presented with an application to enjoin a flagrantly unconstitutional law engineered to prohibit women from exercising their constitutional rights and evade judicial scrutiny, a majority of justices have opted to bury their heads in the sand." And it does seem likely now, after all these years of Democrats campaigning on if you vote for them, they'll repeal Roe v. Wade, that it is now likely that the case is going to end up back at the Supreme Court. Probably not because of Texas, but as a result of a Mississippi law that restricts abortion to 15 weeks, which is likely to come to the Supreme Court first. Roe v. Wade established that abortion was permitted up to the point of the viability of a fetus outside the womb, taken as being at 24 weeks. In advance of the Texas law coming into effect, abortion providers had already started to respond. For instance, all 11 Planned Parenthood centres were turning away women seeking abortions since all of them were over 6 weeks pregnant. The thing you have to presume is that this single action by the Supreme Court on the Texas bill surely must make it likely that the Democrats, in the short window they've got left before the midterm elections, are going to be increasingly likely to seek to overturn the filibuster in order to stack the Supreme Court with new liberal-minded judges. Various people are presuming that how the judges voted on this case reflects on how they're likely to vote in a substantive abortion case. And the backlash from Afghanistan should make it even clearer than before that Democrats are highly likely to lose control of the Senate, probably both houses, in 2022. Nothing concentrates the mind so much as a deadline. More than anything, it reflects an escalation in America's deep, enduring polarisation that could result in shockwaves that will be felt for a long time to come. Now, this week there was more news about Facebook and political content and an important innovation in China. We'll get to all of that in just a minute. But first, it's time for another live stream. Now, last time I got hit by technical issues with microphones glitching in a way that they'd never done before, just because they decided that this was the month they were going to. I've updated the computer operating system since then, tested it a couple of times since, and it seems now to work perfectly. We will get this process nailed. Maybe it's from this point onwards that we do it. Join me for a topical discussion of the issues of the moment. Ask whatever you'd like in the live chat and I will respond as best I can. That will be taking place at 7 p.m. UK time on Wednesday next week, September the 8th. See you then. A few quick other news items that caught my eye this week. Facebook has started limiting the reach of political content in its news feeds. The company said this: "One of the themes we've heard is that some people feel that there's too much political content in their news feeds. We hope these changes address this feedback and preserve the ability for people to find and interact with political content on Facebook while respecting their appetite for it at the top of their newsfeed." Facebook has faced frequent criticism, with activists on the left pointing at how well certain right-wing content creators do on Facebook, such as Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire. Shapiro in turn has countered the attacks by arguing that the fact that there are fewer conservative content creators overall means that the traffic gets focused onto that smaller number, hence boosting them in the rankings. Reducing the amount of political content overall may well be Facebook's attempt to tackle the criticism by reducing the importance of the political sphere to its content in total, thereby making it less controversial in the future. Now, China has announced that it successfully trialled a new rice plant that grows twice as tall and produces almost twice as many grains than the standard varieties. And that's important news for China, since it has a tight restraint on the amount of agricultural land per head of population, arguably for the whole world generally, given the need to continue to improve food productivity of land for the future and the importance of rice as a staple grain. China has apparently been quietly suffering food shortages over the last year, refusing to acknowledge that externally, but nevertheless ramping up demands for people to avoid food waste and to punish those holding big banquets. Meanwhile, Extinction Rebellion has been protesting for 2 weeks in London and elsewhere, mostly with rather reduced impact to previous times. One of their targets this time was the conservation charity WWF. You can always tell a movement in decline when it takes its eye off whatever its initial purpose was and turns instead against those nearest to itself, people who nevertheless fail its stringent purity tests. There's a famous quote, which is that the secret to success in life is sincerity, and if you can fake that, you've got it made. The fact that the quote is attributed to multiple people is kind of part of its charm. It's fascinating seeing how this desire for authenticity plays out sometimes. Take reality TV. Love Island, a show that, if I understand correctly, takes a bunch of unfeasibly attractive, libidinous young people to dress barely at all and create relationship drama in order to win fame and fortune. Apparently, Love Island has had a collapse in viewers, which has been attributed to complaints that contestants are too aware that they're on a reality TV show, and they seem like they want to win, and that therefore makes them inauthentic. Because nothing screams authentic normally like being semi-naked in front of cameras of national television. It reminds me a bit of the election campaigns in the era of the Founding Fathers, when being seen to actually want the presidency was deeply frowned upon. Your friends would campaign on your behalf. They would earnestly try to persuade you that for the good of the country you had to stand, and your duty was to sigh sadly, swear it was the last thing you wanted. But of course you couldn't refuse to do your duty. Such a burden, but if you really had to, what choice did you have? Now, politicians don't do that anymore. They still fall over themselves trying to fake the authenticity test, sometimes hilariously failing. After Hillary Clinton was accused of being unapproachable on her presidential campaign, she switched tack to show more of her true self. And her reward was more mockery for what was derided as a cynical marketing ploy, which of course it was, but really only because the hoops you have to jump through as a politician are kind of ridiculous. Indeed, probably the only really authentic political voices are the ones who acknowledge the absurdity of the game. I remember the British Minister Michael Heseltine once answering the question whether he'd made mistakes in his career, and he said something like, "I am humble enough to know that I've made mistakes in my time, and politically astute enough to know that I've forgotten what they are." If we have a problem, it's that the public demand for authenticity has overtaken our interest in having basic truthfulness, professionalism, and competence. That applies to our politics, it applies to how mainstream media defines its role. I hate to say, but it applies to how independent media defines its role. All of them chasing a description of authenticity, the rules for which are unattainable by genuine good faith human beings. The result is that we have politics and media that lies unashamedly and gets away with it because of its well-practiced tone of sincerity. People thinking that activists are selling science, that partisans are selling objectivity, and that the real measure of the reliability of an information source is its appearance of authenticity. It is a poor replacement, I say it again, for truthfulness, professionalism, and competence. All right. It just remains for me to give my thanks, as always, to the people who make this channel possible by supporting me on Patreon. Challenging the sacred cows of both extremes in polarised times doesn't win you as many friends as does simply signing up to one or the other and amplifying their talking points. But there is at least a community of people who enjoy the focus on what is or isn't supported by the evidence, who appreciate the attempt to find the truth, even when sometimes it goes to places that they would rather it didn't. You find them in the people who regularly watch these videos, who signal their appreciation and often their challenges to question whether or not I got something right, whether or not I lived up to my mission. And you find them particularly in the crucially important group of Patreon supporters. I literally couldn't do this without you. If you would like to add your support for the independent, fact-focused and non-ideological content I aim to produce here, please go to patreon.com/Mallen Baker. It is always appreciated. Either way, have a great week. My name's Mallen Baker. This is the Mallen Baker Show. Thanks for watching this video. If you liked it, please share with anyone else you think would also enjoy it. Word of mouth is really important to us. And if you've not subscribed yet, what are you waiting for? As the saying goes, that subscribe button won't smash itself.